Hi everyone, Stuart here. I'm here with my good friend Dr. Chris Walling, and we've been having some conversations, and we just wanted to invite you all into our space here, and we could talk a little bit and share with you all some of our thoughts. So Dr. Chris, please tell us about yourself.
Sure. So my background is that I'm a clinical psychologist. I have a private practice in Los Angeles, and I've also been the vice president for the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation for, many, many years now. And so we are a 30-year-old research foundation that funds and sponsors research throughout the world in the areas of brain health, primarily looking at lifestyle factors related to brain health throughout the lifespan. And so we've been chatting, of course, over many weeks now about your new book, and I've been sharing with Stuart about how there's, of course, a big intersection between not only the material that he found in the book, but also the things that we have taught about for 3 decades now.
Yeah, what drew you to Alzheimer's? Why did you pick that?
Yeah, so one of the roles that I had over a decade and a half ago almost was that I was the executive administrator for the UCLA Longevity Center and for geriatric psychiatry. And during my role there, we had begun a rather robust research portfolio in the area of integrative medicine and integrative approaches to geriatric psychiatric conditions. Also, of course, we were vastly, interested in the array of possibilities of how do we help people live better and longer.
Yeah.
And it was through those pursuits that I started to realize, there's a lot of things in my own personal life that really intersect some of the research that we were doing. Mm-hmm. And then it sort of became a lifelong passion through my meeting the founders of ARPF and beginning to work with them through my role at UCLA.
Nice. Well, one of the things that really surprised me the most about Alzheimer's and my book was that it's really an epidemic, isn't it? I mean, I think if I'm remembering correctly, a person is diagnosed with AD every 60 seconds in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking that will be cut in half by the year 2050. It'd be 1 for every 33 seconds. So it's really an epidemic. And,
it is.
The thing that I thought before I did the research on my book, and maybe other people did too, is I thought all Alzheimer's was genetic. That if your parents or grandparents had it, then you may have a predisposition for contracting Alzheimer's. But there's really 2 different types, isn't there?
There are. There's late onset, and then there's kind of early onset. And, between those two, statistically, the folks who have APOE4 genes, which is the gene that leads to Alzheimer's disease, don't actually make up the majority of cases indeed. In fact, the chief causal chain, at least that we can really find of date as far as preventative factors, is lifestyle.
Yeah, that's incredible. So lifestyle trumps DNA, right?
It does. Your genes are not your destiny, as we like to say.
That's a relief.
Yeah,
it's a relief for everybody.
It is a relief.
Yeah, so that's great. So what kind of lifestyle changes does the foundation recommend?
Sure. We really boil it down to 4. We call it kind of the 4 pillars of Alzheimer's prevention. One is stress management and looking at all the areas in which that stress shows up in our life. The other one is, of course, physical fitness and the ability to have movement hygiene be an essential part of our daily lifestyle. The third is diet, and actually following a brain-healthy diet with proper supplementation if it's hard for you to meet all the dietary needs of a brain-healthy diet. And last is what we call spiritual fitness, which is kind of a way in which that people ensure that their lives are really matching their values, that they have a sense of purpose, and that they, are living a life that is generative for them, depending upon their beliefs.
Yeah, I talk about in my book, the importance of course, the food that we eat, and I advocate for a whole foods, plant-based lifestyle. And I talk about, moderate exercise, do whatever you can, maybe go for a walk or swim or just any kind of movement is good. And then that spiritual component, I think, is family and community. That's so important. If you become plant-based, it's really so important to have that support And if your biological family isn't supporting you on your journey, find friends, either online or in person, that will support you, because that is so important. So what does the foundation recommend? That I think the third pillar was
it was diet. And supplements. So really, we follow a kind of a plant-based approach light. We also look at things like the DASH diet, MIND. We look at sort of the classical literature on the blue zones across the planet, who really avoid almost all red meat. If they do any meat at all, they're only doing a little bit of fish. But we really are looking at the nutritional profiles of a particular diet, mostly avoiding what we call alarm foods, which really come from the standard American diet. These are foods that lead to increased inflammation and cause a lot of stress on the body, increasing our overall cortisol levels, and therefore putting us in kind of a chronic state of defense, at least metabolically. So we sort of show how to avoid the alarm foods, and we look at ways in which the foods that are rich in antioxidants, vitamins B, D, E, as well as phytonutrients that are potent antioxidants. These are the ones that we sort of show folks how to create a lifestyle off of.
What about the saturated fats in animal-based foods? Do they contribute to cognitive decline and Alzheimer's?
They really start a kind of cascading effect on the body, where essentially it, over time, shows the body that it has to continue to fight what it's being exposed to. And as a result, puts almost on a cellular level our entire sort of cellular life in a chronic state of defense, where inflammation, which is a cellular way to sort of ward off any kind of intrusion, our cells start to then develop these inflammatory profiles. You end up with an inflammatory gut, you end up with all kinds of osteoarthritic conditions. There's just a kind of inflammatory cascade is really what then gets set up from those types of fats, which is why maybe even in your research, I don't know if you found this, but almost 16 years ago or so, at least the government in the United States passed a law that said you kind of have to let people know if those fats are in the product, because they're essentially fatal over time.
It's so powerful. A lot of people think the association between animal-based foods and saturated fat and heart disease, that's been pretty well established, and it goes back decades. But in that it creates plaque in our arteries. So, but that same plaque, it's indiscriminate, right? It creates plaque throughout the body. It limits blood flow everywhere.
Right.
And so that affects the brain as well?
Absolutely. One of the primary ways sometimes that people are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease is, of course, at first we assess for what we call mild cognitive impairment, which is essentially done through a neuropsychological test battery. But there's also a way to get a PET scan that looks for what's called amyloid plaque and tau tangles. And it's the metaphor that we often use, at least in terms of health education, is that it's like the plaque on your teeth or the plaque in your arteries, but then that ultimately shows up on the brain. And as a result sort of exacerbates the aging process and leads to cognitive impairment. So when you talk about Alzheimer's disease, it's really talking about dementias. And there are many kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's type dementia, though, is the ones that we see on these PET images. And so we've also seen the ability to reverse some of this through lifestyle changes, where people over time are able to reverse their cellular aging process. We've had a number of studies when people adopt a brain healthy lifestyle, they actually start to show that their telomerase, which is kind of like the shoe, if you have like a shoestring, it's like the little plastic bit on the end of a chromosome, the overall telomere, as it's referred to, will essentially regenerate. And that will cause cellular reversing in your aging. So it's really, that's why we're so passionate, I think, at ARPF about brain health. I mean, we are now taking programs that are designed to teach folks about healthier diets, much like, your book, and we're trying to get it in the hands of people who ordinarily wouldn't have access to that kind of information through our public health outreach programs and our brain longevity therapy trainings. So it's nice to have a book like yours out there.
Thanks, and I so appreciate the work that you're doing. We are born into the matrix, as you know, and so eating animal-based foods is natural to us, and we're taught to believe that it's natural, necessary, and nutritious, when it's the science in my book shows it's none of those things, really. It's the marketing of these foods that convinces us that giving them up is going to ruin our health. But the science in my book shows that when we do give up the animal-based foods, our health is restored.
That's right.
And it's really amazing. And the other thing, I guess maybe a final note, that was really a sobering thing that I discovered in writing my book and looking at the leading causes of death of Americans, and that Alzheimer's was 6th leading cause of death last August, and the 3rd leading cause was COVID. Now the COVID numbers have come down, so I guess Alzheimer's has moved back up to the 5th leading cause of death of Americans in this country. And it's not just in the United States. I mean, this is a worldwide epidemic.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's particularly dangerous for women because there's such a strong correlation between Alzheimer's disease and heart disease, which is the #1 killer of women, because it's vascular type dementias that sometimes lead to AD. But back to your point though, in terms of people's capacity to make changes, I think one of the things that we've discovered in our public health outreach is that it's really hard for people who have spent years addicted to meat-based products and dairy particularly, where they're consuming, the average American consumes approximately 200 pounds of meat a year, 600 pounds of dairy a year. Those types of substances really have a kind of dopaminergic response in our bodies. They create a kind of addiction of sorts.
Right.
And as a result, there's a lot of ambivalence to making those changes. They are culturally bound in social norms. They are tied up with so much meaning for people. And so as a result, we try to support our public health educators through our training programs to say, look, we are all ambivalent to making healthier choices and healthy changes in our lives. And we have to kind of roll with that resistance and really understand that we meet people where they are and show them the information like what you're writing about, and try to help them look at ways in which that they have agency as a pathway to empowerment, more than a kind of like you have to eat this way or you will suffer kind of approach.
Blaming and shaming people just gets their defenses up and is not effective. It's not an effective tool to bring about change. And so, I'm about presenting information to people, and I try to do that in my book in a non-judgy way, but just like lay it out there and then let the person decide, because it's a choice. We don't think we have the choice, but this is the matrix. We have a blue pill or a red pill. We have been taught the blue pill. That's what we've been taught since birth, is to just to eat animal-based foods. And so the red pill is breaking from that. For me, it was overnight. Once I chose the red pill, it was pretty much instantaneous for me. But it doesn't have to be that way for everybody. Just cutting back on animal-based foods a little bit at a time. Do a meatless Monday or something like that. Start out gradually. And it'll make a difference for yourself, but also for the planet and the animals. So don't think you have to do this, cold turkey. And if you do, just like if you were to give up cigarettes or caffeine cold turkey, you would feel pretty bad.
Totally.
And the same may be true for people who are eating meat and dairy. If you give it up right away, you may have a few days or whatever of feeling kind of lousy, but your body will learn to adapt and you will start feeling better. But you don't have to do it overnight. You can do it slowly, make gradual changes. Your health will improve. Is that what the research that the foundation has found?
It is. And so I think I just want to say in closing that we're grateful that books like yours exist out there in the world. We need this kind of information to come in many different forms for people to start to understand that, as we said at the start of our chat today, your destiny is not in your genes. And you have the ability to make these changes in your life and to be there with the people that you love for a lot longer than one might have thought in the beginning.
Nice. All right. That's a great way to end up. Thank you, Dr. Chris Waller, for being here, and it's been a pleasure. And this is just a first time doing this. I think we're going to try to have a longer discussion sometime later. So stay tuned for that, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.